everybody. Thank you for joining us once again for Tech Safe in Worcester, Massachusetts. I'd like to give a shout out to our wonderful producer, Adam Rice, who's been with us faithfully for now 23 episodes of Tech Safe. So Adam, thank you so much for all your support this year, and to station manager Mauro Di Pasquale for his generosity in offering us this opportunity. So today, we want to give you a rundown on legislation here in Massachusetts. We're very grateful that Senator Michael Moore joined us a few episodes ago to talk about his bill, which would allow citizens in Massachusetts to opt out of the wireless radiation-emitting utility smart meters. That is one of 6 bills that we have here in session right now in Massachusetts, and I want to give us a walkthrough on what those bills are. Starting with Senator Michael Moore's bill, it is Senate 2152, an act relative to smart meters. Now, this bill is crucially important to get past this legislative session. Right now, we have 2 major utility companies in Massachusetts and a few other smaller ones, and then others where towns run their own utilities. So this bill would apply to everybody. And the purpose of this bill is to give the public the right to opt out of utility smart meters without being surcharged a fee or a tariff to do so. So here's the story with these smart meters. As you saw in our episode with Manawa Shio, they pulsate microwave radiation 24/7. The industry will tell us that, oh, you know, it only pulses a couple seconds a day. But when I took my radiation detection meter and I measured the radiation coming off of the digital meters on my home for electrical and for solar, when I did the math, it was pulsating 17,000 times a day. So if you have anybody who's near those smart meters that are being mounted on our homes, or even just the digital ones, if it has a Federal Communications ID number on it, that means it is transmitting radio frequency radiation. So if you put, for example, a vulnerable person in our population, such as a child, a pregnant woman with a fetus inside of her, an elderly person, or anybody with an existing health condition, they are particularly vulnerable to this man-made energy. And that's because our bodies, our biological cells only have so much energy. And that's pretty well calibrated to get us through our everyday activity and then to do cell repair and regeneration while we sleep. If we leave ourselves exposed to close-range electromagnetic fields or radio frequency microwave radiation, it's all the same man-made energy. If we leave ourselves exposed to this, and often we do unwittingly, our biological cells can't keep up. They're working overtime to try and fend off the harm that this is doing to our cells, and then it can't properly take care of our everyday cell repair and regeneration. So the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention already has something called the ALARA principle. It stands for as low as reasonably achievable. That means ALARA, and that's what they say for ionizing radiation, which is the sun, the gamma rays, X-rays, and we would never leave ourselves exposed to that 24/7. It's time our government recognizes officially that you don't have to have heat or break an atom in order to have harm. We have literally thousands of studies all over the world showing extensive biological harm. So when you put a utility smart meter on somebody's home, or heaven forbid, you live in a multi-unit dwelling where they put a whole bank of these on a wall outside your apartment or in the basement, or, you know, wherever they're mounting them these days, it ups the amount of radiation that you're getting. But even just from one, we have story upon story of people getting really harmed. I was honored to do a training session at a school in Pennsylvania with a radiologist, a doctor, who had no idea that these man-made low-level non-ionizing frequencies could be harmful until a smart meter went on her home. And Dr. Alexia McKnight will tell you that her brain was so impacted by these microwaves that when she was out driving in traffic, she could not remember whether a green light meant stop or go. So we really need to get ahead of this technology. The wireless industry and the utility companies are looking at their next revenue stream with this smart grid, but it is not smart and it is not safe. All we need to do is hardwire the utility meters to the home. Our homes already have Ethernet. We just need to hook in that way and stop radiating with these antennas. So this bill that Senator Mike Moore has introduced, Senate 2152, an act relative to smart meters, would give everybody the first best step, and that is to opt out of being radiated by one of these meters, and also opt out of being charged a fee to get a safe utility meter put on your home. So the reason why this has gone in with an emergency preamble, as I was alluding to a moment ago, is because National Grid and Eversource are telling our Department of Public Utilities that their fleet of things that are currently installed is going to start, wearing out. And so in 2024 and 2025, they are positioning themselves to put these toxic digital smart meters on all of our homes. So it is a public health emergency, and we hope everybody will support Senate Bill 2152. So that's the first one. And all of our committees that have these bills need to report out by the first week in February, by February 7th. So it's really up to the two chairpersons of each committee to make the recommendation to advance these bills, and then it typically goes to another committee that then will need to report out probably by this summertime. So we as citizens really need to use our voice and speak up. So the chairpersons for the smart meter bill, it's with the Joint Committee on Telecommunications, Utilities, and Energy, and Senator Mike Barrett and Representative Jeffrey Roy have this bill, and we are very hopeful that they will do what they did before the pandemic. They did report this bill out favorably in years past, but then it went to the next committee and they did not act on it, and so it just faltered. So because we have this urgency with National Grid and Eversource saying they're going to put these toxic devices on all of our homes, we really need to see this bill get passed this session. The next bill, the next two bills actually, are introduced by Senator Julian Cyr out of the Cape and the Islands. And many years ago, back in 2014, I had worked with my senator, Karen Spilka, who's now our Senate president and no longer introduces bills, typically. So she had introduced a bill on my behalf to bring the right minds together at the state issue and look at the full wireless issue, because our schools are not being properly informed, our families are not being properly informed, our towns are not being properly informed on the very serious health risks that happen with microwave radio frequency radiation. And I want to add that the Federal Communications Commission had a docket open, or a record open, for 6 years while the industry pushed all this toxic equipment and infrastructure and devices into our society. For 6 years, world-leading scientists, doctors, other healthcare experts, citizens who have been harmed, who have already lost loved ones because of this radiation, all this went into this docket that was called 13-84. And at the end of the day, in December of 2019, the Federal Communications Commission closed that docket and said, we don't really need to fix anything. And once they wrote that officially into something called the Federal Register, then the lawsuits began. There was Environmental Health Trust, Children's Health Defense, and a number of other lawsuits all came in because the FCC completely ignored all of the evidence of harm in the public record. So that lawsuit actually went to the DC Circuit Court of Appeals, and the folks who prepared the legal filings took 11,000 pages of evidence of harm, spent $15,000 to amass it, to get it all organized, and gave 27 big binders to these 3 judges in D.C. and said, here is the evidence of harm. And the judges, of course, are reading through this, and they're talking to the FCC attorneys at the hearing saying, so how did you determine you can still stand behind these microwave radiation public limits from 1996, before we had all this wireless electropollution that we have today? And the FCC attorneys kind of went, well, the FDA said it was okay. So, of course, they say, well, where's the FDA's homework? And not one of our federal agencies has investigated the health and environmental impacts of today's microwave radiation exposures. So the court found the FCC to be guilty. They ruled that they were arbitrary and capricious, which in legal terms means they made it up and they didn't do their homework, that they don't need to fix these public radiation exposure limits. So we have that lawsuit still out there. The judges asked the FCC to do the right thing here and get the science and public policy in line, and it's now been over 2 years and the FCC has done nothing. So there is no cavalry coming from the federal level. We have got to address this at the state level. And so the next 2 bills that Senator Julian Cyr has introduced would be one to form a commission, because he was the second one after Senator Spilka to file a commission bill. Form a commission, get the right minds together at the state level, and let's just figure this out, because once we investigate, we'll have the facts. So we have had these commission bills here in Massachusetts for nearly 10 years now. And we had the same conversation with State Representative Patrick Abrami and Senator Denise Ricciardi up in New Hampshire. And in 7 months, we helped them to get a bill through the House, through the Senate under Governor Sununu's pen, and they passed into law that New Hampshire had to form a commission to investigate the health and environmental impact of wireless technology. They started with 5G and then just very quickly realized it applies to all wireless technology. Even during the pandemic, New Hampshire and their commission of highly qualified doctors, scientists, engineers, members of their local business association, the wireless industry sent their, nationwide representative, and then they had their Attorney General's office, they had their Department of Public Health, and they voted 10-3 on this majority report that documents the conflicts of interest with the wireless industry, the FCC, and the FDA. The FDA commissioned that $30 million study with the National Toxicology Program here in the U.S. that determined clear evidence of cancerous tumors and DNA damage. Right on the heels of our U.S. study, the Ramazzini Institute in Italy found similar findings of cancers and DNA damage from cell towers. Ours was on cell phones, theirs was from cell towers. So we don't need more science. The industry keeps telling us, that's just one study. We don't need more science. We need public policy to protect and to put processes in place to protect you and I and our children and our environment. So the New Hampshire Commission report is free and online. If you go to Massachusetts for Safe Technology and you look at our state efforts page, you will find this New Hampshire report. So they document the harm, they document the conflicts of interest with the industry and with the federal agencies, and they say that wireless is no longer advanced technology. We need to be investing in our states in fiber optics to and through the premises. All that means is you bring a screaming fast signal to the home, to the office, to the schools, and then you simply hook up with Ethernet cables from your routers indoors. And then for your devices, all you have to do is plug in an adapter. Then plug it into your device, go into the settings, turn off all the radiating antennas, and then we have perfectly safe technology without harming ourselves and our loved ones from radiation. So we have had this Senate Resolve 155 relative to disclosure of radio frequency notifications since, well, this one I think perhaps showed up in 2016 or 17. And I just looked today, and with great thanks to the Joint Committee on Consumer Protection, which is led by Senator John Cronin and Representative Tacky Chan, heartfelt thanks for once again reporting this bill out favorably to form a commission to do what New Hampshire has already done. And let's launch off of their excellent recommendations to protect our communities, to not allow close-range cell towers or these horrific 5G small cell antennas that are showing up literally at the curb in our public access way right outside of people's bedroom windows to radiate them 24/7. So we need to launch off of what New Hampshire already did, and Massachusetts can take swift action to start protecting our communities. This bill, Senate Resolve 155, has now gone into the hands of Senator Michael Rodrigues and Senator Cindy Friedman, who are the co-chairs of the Senate Ways and Means Committee. So we hope they too will take swift action to enact this bill into law and send a clear signal to industry that we need to work together. We can do better. We can have amazing technology. You can still have high profits, but without radiating the populace and the environment. So the second bill that Consumer Protection has, and again, they will need to report out on this one by the 7th of February, it's Senate 156, an act relative to the safe use of electronic devices by children. So our kids are not just little adults. Their immune systems are still under construction, their central nervous system, all of their organs. And we know scientifically that this radiation damages DNA, and it is an immunosuppressant. Additionally, our children's skulls are thinner than yours and mine. Their brains have a higher water content, so they are inch per inch absorbing more radiation into their bodies and brains than you and I. So we've got to protect our kids. So thank you, Senator Sear, for Senate 156, an act relative to the safe use of electronic devices by children. And again, folks, it's not rocket science. Hardwire the technology and turn off the radiating antennas. So that leads us to our next bill, which we're so very grateful to Senator Paul Mark out in the Berkshires for introducing this bill. Senator Mark used to be a lineman for the telecom industry many years ago, and he already knew that other workers were getting sick from the high man-made energies coming off of the telephone lines. So it wasn't difficult for him to look at the research on the digital technology pulsations of microwave radiation. So thank you, Senator Mark, for introducing the bill that Representative Carolyn Dykema had introduced years ago. So some of you may know that part of my journey with this is I used to run the local education foundation here in Ashland, Massachusetts. And during that time, the industry was pushing in their 21st century classroom. And, you know, we didn't have funding to get all the wireless infrastructure or the iPads or the Chromebooks or the smartboards or the minis, nor did we know any of the risks. So good doobie parents, we jumped in and did fundraising, and we got all this wireless stuff in our schools. And then one night at book group, my girlfriend Wendy tipped me off that there could be biological effects from wireless. So I'm a technical and professional writer by trade, and I said, is there any science to this? So when I started looking, I was just astounded to find what New Hampshire found when they did their investigation: cancers, DNA damage, infertility, electromagnetic illnesses, headaches, nosebleeds, nausea, dizziness, anxiety, suicidal ideation, skin problems, ringing in the ears, hot ear when you have the cell phone, and it just goes on and on. We are biologically overpowering our cells with this man-made microwave radiation. So when I brought it to my schools, it was not an easy conversation to have, but a number of our school committee members did their homework. And we actually became the first in the United States to even have this little sign hanging in our classrooms with best practices for mobile devices. Turn off these devices when not in use. Turn the Wi-Fi on only when needed. Always place the mobile device on a solid surface, and keep your distance from anything that's radiating. So when I mentioned that the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention already have this ALARA principle, it's based on 3 stems. 1, time. Spend as little time around something that's radiating as you can. 2, distance. Create as much distance between you and something that's radiating as you can. And 3, if you cannot get away from it, you better shield. And that's why we wear a lead apron when we do an x-ray to protect our organs. But our government has not owned up to the fact that we are radiating our entire population right now, and we're not doing anything to protect ourselves. So it was hard work, but I'm so grateful that Ashland Public Schools became the first in the nation to even have this sign with these precautionary measures. Next to Ashland is Southborough, Massachusetts, where the Fay School is. And the Fay School is the elementary feeder school into St. Mark's, which this is where very international, prestigious boarding school where Saudi princes might be sending their sons to get their education. So they have a wait list a mile long of people trying to get into this school from all over the world. So when this family realized that the reason their son kept getting so sick was because of the industrial strength Wi-Fi systems in our schools today, they went to the schools and said, here's our doctor's note. Our son has become electromagnetically sensitive and he needs accommodations, and the schools wouldn't offer the accommodations. They offered to pay out of pocket to hardwire. The schools wouldn't let them do that. And so they wound up suing, and it was Representative Carolyn Dykema, who was their state representative, who introduced this next bill, which this session is called Senate 316, an act relative to best management practices for wireless in schools and public institutions of higher education. Again, thank you, Senator Paul Mark. Rep. Dykema has left the legislature, and we're so honored that you picked this up for us because you can see the harm that we're doing to our kids in schools. So this bill would require the Massachusetts Department of Elementary and Secondary Education to establish best practices regarding the health and safety of public school students and staff. I have met with the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education, and they have told me point blank they are waiting for higher authorities to tell them what to do. We know how to fix this. We know how to hardwire our schools and get rid of the radiation, but we need a law to tell our education organization at the state level to get on it. So just this week, a wonderful article came out of the United Kingdom, and this is titled, "Mom Takes Her 3 Kids Out of School After Claiming School Wi-Fi Was Making Them Sick." And she wasn't on a witch hunt or anything. Her kids kept coming home from school sick. And when, I'll quote from this, "When James told me he just couldn't think in school, I was really concerned. He could only think straight when he was at home." And this was from a very bright boy who loved to learn. And once he got home, all the fog lifted. He was happy. He could access his studies. But he often felt nauseous and had a runny nose from an inflammatory problem, which took longer to ease off. And by the time it did, he'd be back in class and the problem would start again. So this mom and her husband started researching, and they came across everything that the New Hampshire Commission found with all this harm. So parents are taking their children out of harm's way, but we should not be forcing parents to give up their incomes and their livelihoods to stay home and educate their children when we have perfectly capable schools that just need to remove the wireless radiation. And we know now children do not learn best from a screen. They learn best from movement, from the natural environment, from human touch, and from interactions with meaningful connections to other children and trusted adults. That is how a child learns best. Silicon Valley execs have already figured this out. They send their kids to schools with no technology, not hardwired, not wireless, no technology. So we need to start protecting our kids throughout the Commonwealth, throughout the country, and throughout the world. So we implore you, Senator Jason Lewis, Representative Denise Garlick, when we testified on this bill at the State House, I left you with a microwave radiation detection meter that shows how much radiation is in our environment. Here in the studio, which is very low, we are at 41 microwatts per square meter, and I left you that meter and invited you to take it into your homes and into your community to see what readings you were getting, because when I turn my phone on, when I come out of airplane mode and the Bluetooth and the Wi-Fi and the locator and the hotspot and the cellular and the data, all these separate antennas come online. We just went from 44 microwatts per square meter to 2,400,000 microwatts per square meter. I'm going to put this back in airplane mode so we stop radiating me. And then after a second, we see it drops right back down to 35. In our indoor spaces where we sleep, we should be at 10 or less. Around children, there should be 0 radiation. And in indoor spaces in general, we should aim for at least 100 or less. So we have that bill, Senator Lewis, Senator Garlick. I hope you did your due diligence with that meter and you are going to start protecting the children in the Commonwealth. The last 2 bills are new this year. The first one is from Senator Paul Mark again, that would give people the right to ask for accommodations and not be injured when out and about in public. It's Senate 1044, an act prohibiting injurious operation or offering services or products that discriminate against or injure protected classes. So handicap doesn't just mean you need a handicap ramp anymore. Walmart just announced recently from 8 a.m. to 10 a.m. they are making a low sensory environment. They're turning off these man-made lights that are so hard on many people. They're getting rid of the music that can overpower people with sensory issues. And they're training their staff how to be gentle with others and not be crashing shopping carts and stuff. So it's already happening, but we need legislation to strengthen our already pretty good civil rights legislation in Massachusetts. So we asked Senator Jamie Eldridge and Representative Michael Day on the Judiciary Committee to please pass this bill with urgency for everybody who has disabilities. And then lastly, House Bill 2158 is an act recognizing electromagnetic sensitivity as a disease dangerous to the public health, requiring inclusions in MAVEN, which is our state database for tracking wireless or for tracking all illnesses, and establish a Massachusetts electromagnetic sensitivity registry that would require biennial reporting as part of population health trends. So this is critically important that we track what is happening so our doctors and our local town health agents can report when people are saying they are electrically sensitive. With better data, we can make better public health policy. So please, everybody, join us at Massachusetts for Safe Technology. We will send out action items that we as citizens, nothing changes if we don't include our voices. So we will be asking you for your name, your address, and your phone number to sign on to notices that we will send over to these chairpersons of each committee in early January and throughout the month so they can make their determinations by February. So thank you for joining us for Massachusetts for Safe Technology. Thank you, WCCA TV in Worcester, for this wonderful opportunity for Tech Safe. Have a Tech Safe day, everybody. Thank you.